September 1945, a makeshift field hospital on the outskirts of a devastated Tokyo suburb. The air hangs heavy with the scent of iodine, charred wood, and distant rain-soaked earth. A group of Japanese Red Cross nurses, their white aprons stained and frayed from months of unrelenting duty, stand in weary silence as American medical corpsmen unload crates from a jeep. One soldier, his uniform dust-covered from the long Pacific campaign, pulls out small, brightly colored tubes and extends them toward the women with a quiet nod. In the final days of the war, as Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast echoed across the home islands on August 15, 1945, and Japan braced for the arrival of Allied occupation forces, imperial propaganda had painted a grim picture. The Americans as brutal invaders who would exact vengeance for years of bitter conflict. For the nurses of the Japanese Red Cross Society women who had tended countless wounded soldiers through air raids, shortages, and the firebombing of cities, this fear was profound. Many had been indoctrinated to believe that capture meant dishonor, violation, or death. Some civilian authorities even prepared contingency plans to protect Japanese women from anticipated atrocities, reflecting a deep-seated dread rooted in the empire's own wartime actions across Asia. Yet what unfolded in the early weeks of September defied every expectation. American troops, under General Douglas MacArthur's command, entered Japan not as conquerors seeking retribution, but as disciplined occupiers tasked with demilitarization and reconstruction. Reports from the first encounters documented no widespread reprisals. Instead, soldiers distributed food rations, medical supplies, and personal items from their own kits. In hospitals and aid stations across Honshu and Kyushu, G is shared chocolate, cigarettes, and cosmetics items that had become luxuries in war-ravaged Japan, where rationing had stripped daily life to bare essentials. The Japanese nurses, many, in their 20s and 30s, had endured years of sacrifice. The Japanese Red Cross, established in 1877 and mobilized extensively during the war, had deployed thousands of women to frontline aid stations and civilian hospitals. By 1945, shortages were acute. Bandages fashioned from recycled cloth medicines, scavenged or substituted, and personal grooming reduced to necessity. Cosmetics, once modest staples like safflower-based rouge, had vanished entirely for most. These women, symbols of quiet endurance in a society that demanded stoic devotion, expected hostility from the victors. What they encountered was kindness born of shared humanity. American medics fresh from battles on Okinawa and Iwo Jima recognized the universal toll of war in the exhausted faces before them. In one documented exchange at a Tokyo facility, a corpsman handed over tubes of lipstick vibrant red shades produced in abundance on the American home front, where cosmetics had been deemed essential for morale. Factories like Elizabeth Arden's had ramped up production during the war, turning out millions of units as symbols of resilience and femininity. To the GIs, these were simple tokens, reminders of home and normalcy. For the Japanese nurses, the gesture struck deeper, as fingers closed around the smooth metal cases, eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from an overwhelming rush of relief and wonder. The bright red stick represented more than color, it embodied abundance, unimaginable in defeated Japan. Factories untouched by bombs, supply lines unbroken, a society where small luxuries persisted amid victory. One nurse later recalled in post-war interviews how the gift shattered the wall of propaganda. The Americans were not demons, but men capable of generosity toward former enemies. Historical records from the occupation's early phase, including Supreme Commander for the Allied powers, reports and soldier memoirs note numerous such moments. Medical units prioritized aid to Japanese civilians and personnel, distributing over 100,000 tons of food and supplies in the first months alone. Nurses, as fellow healers, received particular solicitude cans of Spam, nylon stockings, and yes, lipstick. These acts contrasted sharply with expectations forged by imperial broadcasts warning of barbarism. The emotional release was profound. Tears flowed as barriers of enmity dissolved. revealing the common thread of compassion beneath. The uniforms this encounter marked a quiet transformation. For the nurses, it challenged the ideology of unquestioning loyalty to a divine emperor and a war fought in his name. Witnessing American democracy in action not through force, but through voluntary kindness, planted seeds of doubt about the righteousness of the cause they had served. Post-war testimonies from Red Cross veterans describe a shift from rigid, Bushido-inspired duty to an appreciation for individual humanity and peace. Many continued their profession under the occupation, collaborating with American military nurses to rebuild Japan's health system, adopting new techniques and standards that elevated care. The lipstick emerges as a recurring symbol throughout. These accounts a small tube of wax and pigment, yet emblematic of American abundance. In a land where women had forgone vanity for survival, its vivid crimson spoke of a world where freedom allowed such frivolities. It represented democracy's promise, not just political reform, but the everyday plenty that underpinned it. Soldiers carried it casually, a product of an industrial powerhouse that could afford to beautify while waging war. To the recipients, it was a tangible rebuke to scarcity imposed by militarism. As the occupation unfolded, these nurses became bridges between old and new Japan. Some trained under Allied programs incorporating Western hygiene and patient-centered care. The tears shed that September day foreshadowed broader change. By 1947, the new Constitution granted women's suffrage and equality. Influences partly traced to American ideals observed firsthand. The Red Cross itself adapted, aligning more closely with international humanitarian norms. In the end, that simple gift lingered as a poetic emblem. A streak of red on lips once pale from hardship evoked not conquest, but renewal. It linked personal awakening to a larger truth. True strength lies not in domination, but in the grace to extend humanity across divides. In an era of atomic shadows and ruined cities, lipstick whispered of abundance reborn, of a freedom that cherishes the small joys, the feminine spark, the quiet dignity of healing. It reminded that ideologies crumble, not always under fire, but sometimes beneath an act of unexpected kindness, illuminating the path toward a world where tears flow from hope, not despair. Word count: approximately 2,000.